Dorian Yates and Mike Mentzer had some of the most impressive physiques that bodybuilding has ever seen. And what made them stand out even more is that they trained completely differently than all of their other competition. Instead of spending 2, 3, sometimes even 6 hours in the gym like bodybuilders Franco Columbu and Arnold Schwarzenegger, they focused on really short, super intense training called high intensity training. But where did high intensity training even originate? Where did it come from? And how did Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates even learn this style of training? The answer: Arthur Jones, the founder of the Nautilus Equipment Company. Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates had another trick up their sleeve. They were using advanced exercise equipment created, designed by exercise genius Arthur Jones. This equipment allowed Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates to train harder, focus on the muscle more directly, and make their workouts much more efficient, which is why they had to spend a lot less time in the gym developing these amazing physiques compared to their competition. Nautilus training equipment was a game changer back in the 70s when it came out. What gave Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates and other high-intensity training bodybuilders such an advantage by using this equipment? In today's video, I'm going to go over the differences that Nautilus equipment had compared to all the other exercise equipment that most bodybuilders were using, and why Nautilus was so much better and largely contributed to Mike Mentzer's and Dorian Yates' insane physiques. Now let's start with the story of Mike Mentzer. And if you want to hear more of the history of Mike Mentzer's bodybuilding career, follow Heavy Duty College. A friend of mine and colleague, John Little, runs this channel, and he was good friends with Mike Mentzer and saved a lot of the phone recordings and the videos and the conversations that he had with Mike Mentzer, which is where I got this background story that I'm about to share with you. So way back in the 1970s, when young bodybuilder Casey Viator started winning all these competitions due to his huge, impressive physique, Mike Mentzer had also been competing at the same time, sometimes against Casey Viator. And briefly, after one of these shows where Casey took first place, Mike Mentzer approached him and he asked him, "Casey, what are you doing? What have you been doing to build such a tremendous physique and essentially blow all the other competition right out of the water?" As the story goes, Casey Viator smirked, he pointed over to Arthur Jones, and he said, "Go talk to that guy." That was the moment Mike Mentzer was introduced to Arthur Jones, the founder of the Nautilus Training Equipment Company. From there, Mike Mentzer was so intrigued by what Arthur Jones had to say about all these bodybuilders spending way too much time in the gym and not training their muscles hard enough, Mike Mentzer would go on to learn the principles of high-intensity training by Arthur Jones, and even worked for Arthur Jones for a period of time. And it was at that time Mike Mentzer started using high-intensity training, and he really significantly improved his physique to the point where he would go on to win a bodybuilding competition with a perfect score. And he was the only bodybuilder to date to have been able to do that. Now let's talk about Dorian Yates' story. How did he get introduced to high intensity training? Now a lot of people think that Dorian Yates started with traditional bodybuilding approaches, but that's not exactly true. I had a personal interview with Dorian Yates a few years ago, and this is what he told me. So right as Dorian Yates started getting into bodybuilding and building muscle and building his physique and preparing it for competition, his initial training approach came from the heavy-duty training that was in the Joe Weider magazines. And the Mike Mentzer heavy-duty training was heavily influenced by Nautilus training principles outlined in Nautilus Bulletins 1 and 2, which Dorian Yates also referred to when learning his approach to training and learning the principles of high-intensity training. So Dorian Yates actually started with high-intensity training from the very beginning. And as you can see in some of his blood and guts videos where he is training to a huge amount of intensity of effort, he's using a combination of barbells, hammer strength, and of course, Nautilus equipment. Now, believe it or not a lot of people know this, hammer strength, the plate-loaded exercise machines that you see Dorian Yates using in blood and guts training, was developed by Arthur Jones' son, Gary Jones. So Hammer Strength is actually sort of a child company of Nautilus equipment. So what makes this equipment so special, and what gave them such an advantage opposed to what all the other bodybuilders were doing using traditional free weights, barbells, cables, and even sometimes bodyweight exercises like dips, pull-ups, things like that. Well, Arthur Jones discovered way back in the early 1970s that a muscle's strength throughout its range of motion changes based on where the limb is in that range of motion. This is called the muscle force curve or the muscle torque curve. Muscles are generally weaker in their lengthened position and strongest somewhere in the middle of the range of motion where the actin and myosin filaments overlap the most and create the most cross bridging, thereby the most mechanical tension. And then as a muscle reaches its fully shortened position, the actin and myosin start to bend and get in each other's way, and they cannot produce as much cross bridging, reducing the amount of strength the muscle fibers can produce. So after realizing this, Arthur Jones saw that traditional exercises using barbells, free weights, or even cables provided a significant problem. They weren't allowing you to train the muscle in its strongest position. And many of these exercises would cause trainees to get stuck in the stretch position simply because the muscle could not produce enough force there because it's a weak area of the muscle. So while a lot of bodybuilders thought they were training really hard and training to failure, what they were really reaching is what's called a mechanical sticking point, not necessarily muscular failure, where they would fail in the exercise, but not because their muscles were completely fried, but because the resistance was too heavy in a position where the muscle cannot produce a lot of force. This is what influenced Arthur Jones to create the cam. So basically what the cam is, it's a circular kind of shell-shaped object that was placed chains or Kevlar belts to vary the amount of resistance that the user experienced throughout the range of motion. In the cam, you'll notice there is a pivot point or a hole in the middle, and the distinct shape of the cam would change the distance between where the machine pivots and where the belt or the chain touches the cam. The further the distance from that pivot point, the more resistance the user on the machine experienced. The shorter the distance between that axis of rotation and where the belt touched the cam, the least or the less amount of resistance the user would experience. So this allowed for variable resistance, which removed sticking points from a lot of exercises that were known to have them, such as a barbell row, chest press, pull downs, and also simple movements like lateral raises. So what this cam allowed the user to do is train much, much harder because they were actually taking their muscles to a point of muscle failure without getting stuck in mechanical sticking points. This was also allowing them to challenge the muscle in its strongest position where it's able to produce the most force, somewhere in the middle of the range of motion where the actin and myosin overlap and cross bridge the most effectively. Now, this may seem completely counterintuitive to what is currently popular in the fitness industry with lengthened partial repetitions. And that is because lengthened partial repetitions are complete nonsense. You actually do not want to overload the muscle in its weaker position. It does not produce more muscular tension so long as you are training with high degrees of effort. So Arthur Jones had this figured out 50 plus years ago. And the fitness industry is so lost that even to this day, they don't understand muscle force curves and actin and myosin overlap, active and passive insufficiency. So Nautilus training equipment still to this day allows the user to experience much more intensity of effort with much smoother repetitions due to the huge reduction in friction between the guide rods and all the other moving parts of the equipment. And the beauty of this equipment is that it helps the individual bodybuilder train much harder and therefore recruit a lot more muscle, stimulate a lot more muscle through that recruitment, and get better results. Now, hammer strength equipment that was developed by Arthur Jones' son, Gary Jones, is widely available in many commercial gyms right now. While Nautilus is still relatively rare, hammer strength equipment actually adjusts the resistance profile throughout the exercise by using a different mechanism. It changes the moment arm by changing the distance the plate is from the axis of rotation. So for instance, on a chest press, if you notice the design of a hammer strength machine, the plate or the weight that you put on the machine is going to be closer to the user in the starting position where their muscles are stretched. And then as the user pushes the work arms forward, the distance between the weight and where the machine rotates increases, lengthening the moment arm and increasing the resistance in the more extended position. So hammer strength was a very clever way to accommodate variable resistance in exercises at a much lower cost and much higher durability. So Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates, and other high-intensity training bodybuilders like Sergio Oliva, Boyer Coe, they had a distinct advantage compared to other bodybuilders using this Nautilus and hammer strength equipment because they were able to work their muscles way harder and of course much more safely, since these machines allow the user extra stability and the ability to focus on the muscle group they're trying to work rather than distracting themselves with balance and other techniques that can be very distracting with a lot of free weight and barbell movements. If you happen to find a gym that has old school first gen, second gen Nautilus equipment, or even the newer stuff like Nautilus Nitro, I highly recommend you give it a try, and you're going to notice a huge difference when you take your muscles to failure on those pieces of equipment versus what you traditionally see in most gyms. But if you don't have access to really high quality equipment like hammer strength and Nautilus, this is where you're going to need an expert coach to show you how to optimize the use of the equipment you do have access to, because all equipment works if you know how to use it. And when you know how to use this equipment and learn how to really challenge your muscles with it, that's where you see tremendous improvements in muscle growth and body composition. Click the link below, book a call with me and my team to join my coaching. I recently had a client put on 11.7 pounds of muscle in just 4 weeks, and he's 40 years old and a trained bodybuilder. That's how significant the difference is when you learn how to train your muscles correctly. So click the link below and stop waiting and get your best physique now instead of trying more nonsense that doesn't work. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I drop more videos helping you get in the best shape of your life in as little time possible. See you next time.